Now remember, we got these hexagons on Saturn sending out these radio waves. And again, a hexagon is going to give you 666, which can connect to carbon 12, which also gives you 666. And then we've got all those connections between Saturn and the Earth. And again, we know Saturn is sending out these radio emissions coming from these hexagons. And then we know that these radio emissions are linked to the E-ring, Saturn's largest visible ring that's stretching out the farthest away from the planet, which is created by these hexagons interacting with one of Saturn's moons. And we know that the E-ring is stretching out pretty far from Saturn. Every 10 to 15 years, the Earth actually crosses paths with the E-ring. I mean, they say when it happens, it looks like Earth is at the very edge of this ring. So we know the E-ring has to be stretching out pretty far, considerably close to the Earth. I mean, you got that Cassini image of Earth being visible at a distance from the E-ring. I mean, it's like a speck, but you can still see how close the E-ring is in comparison to the Earth. So we know the E-ring has some distance to it, but the E-ring isn't actually Saturn's largest ring. There's actually an even larger ring that they say is created by Saturn's moon, Phoebe, called the Phoebe ring. And they say that the Phoebe ring is actually Saturn's outermost ring, that is larger than the E-ring, and that it actually stretches out even farther than the E-ring. Now, again, the E-ring is Saturn's largest visible ring, but they say that the Phoebe ring can't actually be seen with the naked eye, and that the only way that they were able to detect it was through infrared. Now, they say that this ring is made of space dust that come from Saturn's moon, Phoebe. But again, the only way this ring is visible is through infrared. So if it's only space dust, why can't it be seen with the naked eye? When you're dealing with infrared, you're talking about electromagnetic radiation. Electromagnetic radiation sent out through radio waves. And we know that just behind the Phoebe ring, we have the E-ring that's being formed by electromagnetic energy, radio waves being sent out by those hexagons on Saturn. And then think about it. If the E-ring is already so close to the Earth, it's visible from a distance, then just how close to the Earth do you think this Phoebe ring is? Remember, it can't be seen with the naked eye. And they haven't disclosed how far this ring actually stretches out. They say it's a new discovery and they're still learning things about it. But if it's larger than the E-ring and it's stretching out further than the E-ring, you would have to assume that this thing is extremely close to the Earth. So again, where are these radio emissions from Saturn going? It seems like they are going to the Earth. And again, the radio emissions are coming from these hexagons. And these hexagons give you a symmetry of 666. And then we look at the Earth and we can see that 98.9% of the Earth is composed of 6 protons, 6 electrons, and 6 neutrons. So it almost seems like that frequency of 666 is being sent from Saturn to the Earth. Remember, you're also getting those mixed signals from the northern and southern hemispheres, polar opposites, those 2 separate vortexes giving off those 2 separate forms of energy being projected from the same source. So it's like the energy of duality, negative and positive, is also being sent out. And you got this energy being generated from within these hexagons. And from the word hexagon, you get the word hex. Now, this is interesting because in mathematics, the word hex means 6. But when you hear the word hex used outside of math, it's referring to witchcraft, spell casting, as in placing a hex on someone, or in other words, placing a curse on someone. And this is a big thing in witchcraft. Hexing, casting spells, trying to manipulate other people's energy by sending a stronger and more persuasive energy in their direction. And it's not necessarily about saying hocus pocus and alakazam, and brewing up magic potions. Casting a spell can be as simple as to take control of somebody's mind, using persuasion to get somebody to put the ball and chain on their own mind and willingly give up control, even if they don't realize it. And remember, we can trace so many things back to Saturn. and back to the hexagon or the hexagram, including a lot of these different religions. And of course, there's a lot of truth that you can find in the stories and parables that come from a lot of these religions. But the very structure of the religions that surround a lot of these teachings tends to ignore the things that point towards you doing inner work within yourself. The focus always seems to be on giving your energy away to something outside of you, giving all your energy up to a God. And what do they call it? The gospel, dedicating yourself to a God. But where did that word gospel come from? Well, when you look into it, it originally comes from the term Godspell, literally God spell. And we know what a God is, and we know what a spell is, a form of hexing used to manipulate and control someone. And then you look at a lot of these different religions and how they have all these people giving up their energy to something outside of themselves. And then how all these religions connect back to the hexagon and back to the cube, unknowingly chaining themselves to that black cube of Saturn. Or in other words, they are under Saturn's hex. They are under the God spell. Instead of looking for God within themselves, like all these teachings are actually telling us, instead they're willingly giving up their power or their energy to something outside of themselves. Even with Shani in Hinduism, they honor him in the Singapore temple with the black stone. And that black stone represents his control over the material world and his ability to bless you or curse you in the material realm. And remember, Shani represents the root chakra and your attachment to the physical world. So when you give that energy out to Shani or Saturn, it's like you're basically saying, I want to focus on the material side of myself, that side that connects me to the physical world, the earth. And I'm not ready to go any farther than that. And again, you got all these other religions connecting to Shani or connecting to Saturn, including Satanism, which just so happens to be the one that's the most outright about it. They don't care if you know when we're talking about Satan, we're really talking about Saturn. So it would seem like the main function of all these religions would be to keep you attached to the physical, to keep your energy attached to the material world. And like we talked about before, this is exactly what it seems like the primary role of these celebrities and the highly influential people out there is about. Keeping your attention on the material world. Because again, all of these people represent the highest level of material success. And a lot of them are like the ultimate promoters of that full indulgence into the material world. And of course, they all throw up what looks like those 3 6s, which we know is going to take you back to carbon 12, which is pointing right back to the material world. And then a lot of times they place it over their eye, which could connect back to the eye of providence, the all-seeing eye, which is ultimately going to take you back to Saturn, looking like an eye in the sky. And again, you got the ones that are just blatantly obvious about it, letting you know exactly what all of this is about, letting you know that this is about Satan. This is about the 666 material, and that all of this connects back to Saturn. But if you just think about these celebrities and these influential people, these people that have this high level of influence over the masses, and how they, again, are seeming to be promoting the material world to the masses and basically saying, hey, this is where it's at. This is what you want to be. This is the level you want to get to. If you want to get to our level of material success, you're going to have to follow our lead. And then, of course, a lot of what these people are doing seems to be leading back to 666, the devil, Satan. And again, these are the people that are placed out in front of us as those examples of people that have earned the highest levels of material success on the earth. So it's almost as if these people are literally playing the role of Satan, just like that story of Jesus being tempted by Satan in the wilderness and Satan telling him you can have access to the whole world. All you have to do is bow down and worship me. Just forget about God in heaven and focus on me. It's like they are subliminally telling you, in order to have what we have, that full access to the material world and that freedom to be able to fully indulge into the material, You have to give in to Satan. You have to give into your lower self, your inner beast, your carbon 12, 666. And you have to abandon God in heaven, your higher mind. Remember, that same hand sign that looks like 3 sixes is also the Gyan mudra, the mudra of knowledge, the mudra of the mind. So it's like they're subliminally promoting matter over mind. And it's like they're saying that that matter over mind leads you back to the eye in the sky, leads you back to Saturn. And all of this, again, is being used to keep you focused on the material. And in Buddhism, you're going to find something called the mandala. And the word mandala means circle. And the mandala is literally different shapes housed inside a circle. And sometimes you'll have multiple shapes housed within that circle, like one square within another square and so on. Now, the mandala is used during meditation to help give the person that's meditating a better way of visualizing their thoughts and to make it easier for them to open up and to connect with the things going on inside their mind. And the central point of the mandala is supposed to represent the material or the flesh. And then each shape outside of that central point represents different parts of you, different aspects of you, your thoughts, your emotions. And as you start moving away from that central point into those outer shapes, you start moving further and further into your thoughts, into your mind, going deeper and deeper into your mind and further away from the center, the material, until you finally reach that wholeness, that point where everything comes together, represented by that circle encompassing everything. Now, the goal of doing this is supposed to be to increase the connection to your mind, to kind of step away from the material and to go deep within your mind to get a full view of who you really are. And sometimes they will actually house a Buddha in the middle of the mandala. And the Buddha is supposed to help with this whole process of reaching the higher mind. And the particular Buddha that's used to help you break that attachment to the material is called the Vajrayogini. And she literally represents the essence of all the Buddhas in one. And again, she's placed on the mandala to help you break your attachment to the material. And she's usually going to be depicted carrying this knife with a curve in it. And that curved knife is supposed to represent the way that she cuts away all the negative aspects of the flesh. And they say she basically represents this triumph over ignorance, destroying that strong attachment to the material and helping to elevate you into the deeper aspects of your mind. And the shape that they use to represent her is a 6-pointed star, a hexagram. To create the mandala, she sits in the part of that hexagram that forms a hexagon. And then the different points on that hexagon represents you reaching like a pivotal point that you're moving away from the material, that hexagon, and headed toward pursuits of the higher mind, that outer circle. And remember, the hexagon in its third dimensional form becomes a cube. So it's literally like a visualization of thinking outside the box. And of course, the hexagon and the hexagram is going to point you back to Saturn. But also just think about the Vajrayogini holding that curved knife. And then think about Saturn's scythe, that blade with a curve in it. And then also think about the Vajrayogini cutting away at all those negative aspects of the flesh. And then think about Saturn in alchemy as the black sun, taking you through that process of calcination, where it burns away all those impurities and separates you from matter, separates you from the material. Now, if you notice, there's a constant theme playing out here. This idea that in order to grow, in order to advance, we have to break that attachment to the material. And of course, with Buddhism, you have this idea of reincarnation, this idea that life doesn't end after death, that every time we die, our soul is sent back to the earth in a different vessel to continue this journey, and that life is basically a journey where we pick up knowledge and experience throughout these different incarnations, heading toward that ultimate enlightenment, or as they say, nirvana, where we've pretty much learned everything we needed to learn here on Earth. And it's time to move on to that next level. And while there's no concrete proof of reincarnation out there, you've got people who claim to have been reincarnated and people who feel like they've been here before, but there's no concrete proof. But we definitely know that at the core of our existence, we are all energy. What is animating this flesh is energy. This is something that we can even see on a scientific level with the protons, electrons, and neutrons that form the atoms that form us. It's all energy, and energy can't be destroyed. You can move it around, you can manipulate it, you can even suppress it, but that energy will always exist. So the question is, where does that energy go when these physical bodies shut down? And life, that energy, leaves the body. Well, the Buddhists are saying that that energy is sent back here and placed into another body. And we continue playing out this human experience here on the earth. And this is where it gets real interesting, because if you remember, you have those different divisions in Saturn's rings, with the largest division, the Cassini division, being created by the moon Mimas. Now remember, Mimas is Saturn's smallest moon, less than 123 miles around. Yet this tiny moon is causing the largest gap between Saturn's two largest rings. And remember, Mimas orbits around Saturn every 23 hours. And they say that there has to be something weird going on inside this moon, because as it orbits around Saturn, it swings back and forth like a pendulum, just like the pendulum of a clock. And again, it's doing this every 23 hours. And we know the actual time that it takes the Earth to make a full rotation is every 23 hours. So we've got this moon swinging back and forth like a pendulum every 23 hours. And then we've got the Earth making a full rotation every 23 hours. So it would seem like we'd be dealing with time, because we definitely have that connection between Earth time and the orbit of this moon. But also remember what they call Mimas, Saturn's Death Star, because it looks eerily similar to the Death Star from Star Wars. And remember, Star Wars came out in 1977, and they say that we didn't get the first images of Mimas until 1980. Yet somehow the Death Star from Star Wars looks almost identical to Mimas. And because of this resemblance, they've nicknamed this moon the Death Star. So you've got the orbit of Saturn's Death Star lining up with time on Earth. Of course, the most unique thing about Mimas is that crater in the middle of it, because it's got that peak coming out of it. It's supposed to be about the size of Mount Everest. And that crater is actually called the Herschel crater. They say they named it after the astronomer who first spotted Mimas back in 1789. And when you look up that name, Herschel, you're going to see that it means deer. And when you look into the etymology of the word deer, and you look at the original definition of the word, you'll see that the word deer originally meant wild animal or beast. So the word deer originally meant beast. Now remember, the beast, somebody who has fully attached themselves to the material, that antichrist, that beast within that feeds off of the material world, that carbon 12-666. Now back in 2010, they used this heat detecting equipment attached to the Cassini probe to kind of get a gauge of the temperature on Mimas. And when the heat resolution map came back, they saw this kind of V-shaped pattern formed across part of the moon. And they immediately noticed that the shape of this thing looked just like Pac-Man. I mean, it's like you got the body of Pac-Man with the eye almost in the perfect spot and what looks like that wide open mouth. I mean, it literally looks like you got Pac-Man getting ready to chomp down on the Herschel crater. Now we know Pac-Man, super popular video game character, originally released in 1980. The same exact year we got the first images of Mimas, by the way. But if you think about it, Pac-Man was this extremely simple game where you move this yellow dot around and try to chomp away at as many ghosts as you could. You collect energy to make the ghosts vulnerable. And once they become vulnerable, you proceed to consume them. And once you consume them, they respawn at that same starting point. And then that cycle continues over and over again. Collect the energy, consume the ghost, respawn at the original starting point, over and over again. And what is a ghost? A disembodied human, a soul. So you were basically collecting souls, collecting as many souls as you could as Pac-Man. And what was Pac-Man supposed to be? According to the creator of Pac-Man, he got the idea for Pac-Man's design from looking at a pizza that had a slice cut out of it. This is what he said inspired him to create Pac-Man. But when you look at that original design of Pac-Man, it kind of resembles a crescent moon when you really look at it. Even that yellow tint of Pac-Man kind of resembles the light that illuminates from the moon. And if you look at Pac-Man as a moon, the game even starts to make more sense. And it's almost like with this game, you have this theme playing out of the moon collecting souls. And then we go back to Mimas and we got something that looks like Pac-Man on this moon, on the Death Star. And it looks like it's about to devour that Herschel crater. So you've got the beast being consumed by the moon. Or in other words, you've got human beings operating on that carbon-12 666 being consumed by Saturn's Death Star.